I'm Robin, and I'd like to share some thoughts about my book, The Mountain Journeys and High Places. It's a book that developed over time, essentially over my lifetime, and it holds many of the journeys in mountain places across the earth, from New Zealand to Norway to Scotland and back to my home in the Rocky Mountains. Most of these are physical journeys where I'm actually walking across the landscape, but some of them are more what you might call life journeys, like the first chapter on beginnings, which is how I developed my connection to mountains. And what I've done in this book is used my journeys to explore the many different ways we know and experience mountain landscapes. So, of course, mountains are found across the planet because there is tectonic motion and associated volcanic activities that have strung them across the world. And these mountains are quite diverse. Some of them are still rising, some are eroding, some are jagged, and some are rounded. But one thing they all have in common are they all hold stories. There are geological stories, of course, that the mountains hold in their layers and their folds, in their peaks and along their ridges. And these are stories of the Earth's motion and of time. And they tell of the Earth's creation and of the creatures that once lived here that are written into the fossils in the layers. So the mountain stands before us with all these great stories, the geological stories, and it stands has a foot in the earth and reaches up to the mountains. And it's a physical form that we can encounter and embrace, different from places like the ocean or the desert. And so we weave our cultural stories into the mountains' geological stories. We create stories about the mountains from romantic to scientific, mythic, and otherwise. And sometimes we create stories about mountains that don't even exist, except in story. And we do this, we find inspiration from the mountains for things beyond the mundane. So what I've done in the mountain journeys and high places is look at both the geological and the cultural diversity related to mountains. The diversity of the ways we think about the mountain and the ways we experience the mountain. It starts out with my own beginnings, after which each chapter is a loose historical chronology of how we think about mountains, starting with the sacred, probably the most ancient way of knowing the mountains. Moving through the scientific, somewhat marginalized the sacred, and then into the romantic, which was a reaction to the scientific movements, and the philosophical. And I've also looked at how mountains can be experienced solo and contrasted that how mountains can be seen as home. And the final chapter merges all these different perspectives and experiences into what I call the whole mountain. And it's like looking at a gem or a rainbow. If you look at one facet or one band of color and then move on from there and look at the whole, you can see something beautiful. You can see that whole mountain, that whole rainbow, that whole gem. And to see the whole allows us to participate in the mountain's greatness. So in the book, to do this, I stand with the Maori sacred mountain of Ngarahoe in New Zealand, delve into the mountain's significance for scientific study in the Grand Tetons, where I did my own science research for my master's decades ago. I walk in the path of John Muir in Yosemite to reveal the importance of the mountain in the Romantic movement. Then I turn to the solo experience, carrying the words of Nan Shepherd, an early 20th century writer, as I move into the Cairngorm Mountains of Scotland and contrast that solo experience to experience of mountain as home, another chapter written in Scotland, which feels like a second home now. And I pull it all together in Norway, following the philosopher Arne Næss, an eco-philosopher. And that started out as a philosophical exploration, but ended up incorporating so much more. So there's something that comes in common with all of these different ways of thinking about the mountain. However one understands the mountain, there's a feeling that can grow. It's a common experience derived from spending time in the mountains, being there with awareness and openness. It's a feeling of being almost insignificant and yet also belonging, and knowing that we as humans are very small and ephemeral, um, and an ephemeral part of the vast cosmos, and yet we are still part of it. We belong. And I think this happens in mountains, in particular because of their shape, because they are grounded here on the earth and then they rise up into the cosmos. And so they're kind of a connector from where we are standing up high into other realms beyond what we can see. And this allows us to experience what I call the micro to macro stretch in space and time. Something that's so clear in the mountain landscape because we can be there and experience this stretch. We can stand in an alpine meadow and look at this tiny little ephemeral flower that thrives in what we feel is an extreme environment, and then look up into the sky and feel like we're touching it. And so to feel that stretch from the minuscule to the vast, to the nanosecond and the immediate, to the infinite and eternal, it makes you feel like you're almost nothing, but not quite nothing, because you're there. You're part of that. You're part of that flow, part of that presence of the mountain. And just as everything around you is, and you're not dominant, you're just part of it. You belong. And it's an utterly wonderful sense of belonging within something so vast. We cannot truly comprehend it. It's as the eco-philosopher Arne Naess said, the smaller we come to feel ourselves compared to the mountain, the nearer we come to participate in its greatness. So why does that matter? Why does that matter? Very simply, that feeling of humble belonging just inspires compassion and love for all life, all things, the earth, everything around us, and a desire to care for it, which I think is really important in this day and age. So the book is really an invitation to embrace different perspectives, think about the earth and all life with an open awareness, and find that connection with a larger than human community, the natural world which we belong with. Find that sense of belonging. It is truly something wonderful and something I've tried to share in the mountain journeys and high places, and something I have found in the mountains. Thank you.